Welcome to the Trading Bell Show, and imagine such a bell ringing in a carbon credit market. Of course, we want to talk about that subject today, and joining me today is Evan Skayo, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Vast Carbon, to help us understand what are these things and what potential does it have. Evans, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Maina, for having me.
Yeah, why don't we start with a bell, just automating this kind of a carbon market thing.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. There you have it. The market is open. Hey, let's have that conversation. Welcome to the show. Please have a seat.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I'd like to start this conversation by simple introductions, and I wanted to ask, what are carbon markets and why are they important to Kenya and to Africa?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Maina, for having me on your show.
Yeah.
And I believe for us to be able to understand what carbon markets are, we need to understand the instruments that are traded in carbon markets. And that is basically a carbon credit. So a carbon credit, in the simplest of explanations, is just a representation of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent that is either avoided, removed from the air, or reduced from further emissions. And the biggest question that might come to people's minds at this time would be, how exactly do you achieve these 3 things? How exactly do you achieve avoidance? How exactly do you achieve removal? How exactly do you achieve reduction? So for avoidance, you're looking at projects that are geared towards making sure that we do not have further emissions down the line. So if you're looking at a project, for example, a solar project that stems from moving away from diesel use to solar, that is an avoidance program.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at a company, for example, one of the companies listed here that want to have efficiency gains in their energy use and move away from low efficiency heating or cooling systems to high efficiency heating and cooling systems, that is an avoidance. That is an avoidance program. We could also have carbon credits generated from reduction programs or reduction projects. And reduction projects are actually projects that are geared towards reducing the amounts of emissions that are being generated from a particular activity. One example of that would be the Dandora dam site, for example, that waste to energy project. Because of the fact that we are reducing the amount of methane being emitted into the air and converting that amount towards the generation of energy, that itself is an opportunity for generation of carbon credits. Another opportunity for reduction will be in the transport sector. Assuming, just for illustration purposes, that one vehicle, or your vehicle, for example, emits about 2 or 3 grams per mile. Aggregate that through 60 different users, that's almost about 180 to 100 grams per mile, right? But if you're able to improve our transport sector and our transport infrastructure to a point where you and I decide to use the public transport system instead of using our vehicles, and we utilize, say, an electric bus or a high efficiency diesel powered bus that has an emission of about 6 grams per mile, then you'll see that we've actually had a saving of over 200 grams, right? So that itself is an opportunity for generation of carbon credits. The third area of generating carbon credits will be removal. And here you're talking about activities that are geared towards removing carbon dioxide directly from the air. And now there are usually 2 forms of this, or even more sometimes. There is engineered carbon removal, where you're looking at technology-based ways of removing carbon from the air through direct air capture, but also looking at nature-based solutions like trees, for example, that are able to remove carbon dioxide from the air. So activities such as afforestation are considered as removal projects.
Let's talk now to businesses, because we have quite a number as well, listed ones, the ones who are also watching, and many other people. Businesses that could be asking themselves, what's the benefit of really participating in the carbon markets? You know, what would you say to them?
Fantastic. So if there's one major issue, or rather one major problem that we've always had in climate action, is basically the access to climate financing. We estimate that ESG deficiencies, or rather the funding deficiencies that we have towards achieving our ESG goals as corporates and as institutions is about $3.7 trillion as estimated by the OECD. When you come down to climate financing, for example, in Africa, for us to achieve our NDCs by 2030, we are seeing a shortfall of about $200 billion every single year, okay, which has to be filled in some way, all right? And one of the lowest hanging fruits for us to achieve the filling of this gap is carbon financing. And organizations are able to raise financing creatively through these markets by, one, participating in activities that help reduce, avoid, or sequester carbon, while at the same time generating sufficient revenues to help them achieve their ESG and sustainability goals. So it is extremely important and critical for organizations to start looking at this as an avenue for them to fill the financing gap that we have, because the funding is there. The funding is there, the financing is there, but we need to participate in activities that help us get that funding to us. And carbon markets present an opportunity for us to tap into that.
Okay, lovely. One of the key things is just how to start participating in these particular markets. And I'm sure people who are listening are saying, okay, fine, I love it, I love the benefits. Where do we start?
Excellent. So as we've been operating in this sector, one major issue that we've realized is that there is a significant gap in capacity. And for, people don't know what they don't know. All right?
That's true.
And it's extremely important for us to be able to get people aware of what is out there, what opportunities are out there, and build capacity to of organizations enough for them to be able to identify those opportunities when they see them. Okay, and I think the best starting point for us as a nation and as Africa as a whole is to build the capacity of our organizations to a point where they'll be able to see these opportunities and leverage these opportunities. It is extremely encouraging to see organizations such as Equity Bank, who have built capacity to an extent that they have a whole sustainability department that actually goes even a step further to seeing what opportunities lie in carbon markets, okay, and actually trying to leverage those opportunities. There are opportunities that they're exploring in mangroves, opportunities that they're exploring in clean cooking, and opportunities that they're exploring in other sectors. And I think it will be extremely great and important for us to see this being replicated in other organizations as well, where they are not only building their capacity internally, but also making sure that they use that capacity to explore opportunities out there, because these opportunities are there. And we at Vast Carbon, one of the major things that we do is to try and empower organizations to understand these markets and to guide them in the direction of them utilizing the opportunities that lie ahead of them in these particular markets.
Okay, lovely. I am curious as well to ask, what's the importance of setting up those regulations for carbon markets? That's part one of it. And the other part is, can you explain this difference? Because I've heard about voluntary versus compliance carbon markets.
Excellent.
As you talk about regulation.
Excellent. Voluntary carbon markets, just as the name suggests, they are driven by will. So if you are a project developer who has carbon credits, you willingly reach out to a buyer, say a Delta Airlines or a Netflix, who's willing to buy carbon credits from you, and they're willing to participate in this transaction voluntarily. So they are not mandated by any government, they're not mandated by any law, but they're doing this activity, or they're participating in this activity voluntarily. So that is a major characteristic of voluntary carbon markets, where everything is driven by will of the participating counterparties. Compliance markets, on the other hand, are driven by regulation. So compliance markets are driven by laws that have been formed by either national or regional governments. And their main aim is to ensure that organizations or institutions within those particular jurisdictions abide by certain laws when it comes to climate action. A great example of that is the European emission trading scheme, which actually operates under what we call a cap and trade system, where the government sets a cap to how much emissions you can emit, and if you emit anything above that, you have to go to the market and find carbon credits to come and offset your emissions. Then a buyer on the other side, a seller on the other side, who has lower emissions than what the government has said, will be issued with credits that they can go and sell to someone who's gone above the cap that they've been placed for. So that is a major characteristics of the compliance markets. Yeah. So they are driven by law and regulations, and largely driven by the principle of cap and trade.
Okay, just before you actually head out, who determines the price? just wondering.
Yeah, who determines the pricing of carbon credit?
Of a carbon credit, yes.
Yeah. So there are many factors. Okay. You'll find that there are certain transactions that are done over the counter, and when transactions are done over the counter, is always boils down to the ability to negotiate. Okay. So that way, there's no price set. Okay, it's just me and you agreeing on what price to go with. Okay. There are other situations where people will rely on price data carriers, because there are data carriers that can provide pricing data. So they'll rely on that as a reference point. Okay. Then there are other jurisdictions, like in compliance markets, you'll find that there are governments that set the price, but basically that comes in the form of a carbon tax. Okay, so it really varies, and there's no blanket way of determining a carbon price. Okay. Then in other situations, it's just market forces. Okay. Market forces of supply and demand.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You had said there's a third way, courtesy of Paris.
Yes. So the Paris Agreement actually provided another mechanism. I'll first discuss the market-based mechanism, which is called Internationally Transferred Mitigation Outcomes, or ITMOs. Okay. So in the simplest of terms, what that is the ability of governments to trade each other's mitigation outcomes with other governments. A good example of that will be the agreement that we had recently between the Ghanaian government and the Singaporean government, okay, where they agreed to trade a certain amount of emission reductions with each other. So it is government-to-government negotiations, and those have been poised to provide an opportunity for there to be much better price outlook, because now you are negotiating from a perspective of a government to another government, and with that discussion and those negotiations, you might be able to get to a point where you're having much better prices than you'd have in compliance or even in voluntary carbon markets. So Article 6, largely in the simplest of terms, is where governments and respective governments transact with each other. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, lovely. I wanted you to sort of explain to us, where are we when you look at Kenya and Africa, especially Kenya? Let's focus right here. Yeah. Are we behind schedule? Are we losing out on opportunities? Where would you say we are?
So thank you very much for that question. And Kenya is participating extremely well in carbon markets. Yeah. I'll be happy to say that as of 2022, in the voluntary carbon markets, 60% of carbon credits that came out of Africa came from Kenya, okay? And that is something to be extremely, extremely proud of. Yeah. So there are participants who are actually leveraging carbon markets here in Kenya. I'll give an example of one particular project up in the north in Laikipia that projects to reduce up to 50 megatons, which is 50 million tons of carbon emissions over the next 30 years. Okay, so that brings to it an average of about 1 million tons every single year. That converted to carbon credits, even at an average price of about $3, you're looking at about $3 million every single year just to that one particular project. Okay, so there are already players within Kenya who are leveraging carbon markets, and Kenya is participating quite actively in carbon markets.
Okay. I just want to really paint a picture, because we have people who are saying, okay, fine, individually probably, or corporately, or maybe a group of people have some few things. What have you observed in Kenya? Is there a case example you could give us of someone who's already into it and they're already benefiting from these particular ones, without probably even mentioning names? But is there any that you have handled and you've seen, wow, this one's got it right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So particularly in the clean cooking sector, there are players that are doing amazing work across the continent. Not only Kenya, but across the continent as well. So there are players who are doing improved cook stoves. There are players who are doing electric cook stoves. There are players who are doing using bioethanol for cooking. All right, and they're generating carbon credits, and much of their business models are actually financed by carbon credits. Okay. We ourselves are working together with the National Council for Nomadic Education in Kenya to help clean up the school feeding program. And we're working with the NACONEC to find ways in which we can leverage carbon markets to not only reduce the cost of technology, but sustainably finance the establishment of centralized and decentralized kitchens for the purpose of the school feeding program. Okay. Yes.
We're taking a break. We'll be right back. Please keep it locked in. We're talking Matters Carbon Markets with Evans Kayo. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to the Trading Bell Show. We are talking Matters Carbon Markets, and we are with the Chief Operating Officer, Vast Carbon, Evans Kayo. And, you know, just picking up from where we stopped, I'd like us to explore a few things, because companies are already have moved actually, to really reporting on their sustainability efforts, especially here at the NSE. Every listed company has to abide by the guidelines given in by the exchange. And I wanted to understand from your perspective, how do carbon markets impact the overall sustainability goals of businesses, particularly in the context of climate change mitigation?
Yeah, so it's good that we are here at the NSE where all the money flows, right? Yes. And carbon markets and carbon credits specifically, in their very nature, they are financial instruments, okay? And for organizations to be able to reach their ESG goals and sustainability goals, there certainly will have to be some investment that they'll need to make. Yeah. If a company needs to transition, say from diesel-powered energy sources to solar-powered, which is much cleaner, there has to be some investment that will need to go into that. Absolutely. And carbon markets provide an avenue for institutions to actually reduce or subsidize the costs that they would have otherwise incurred in the absence of carbon markets. So if you are running a company that seeks to transition from fossil fuels to cleaner sources of energy, you will certainly want to consider a situation where 20 or 30% of your investment amount is subsidized through carbon markets. So if we are able to reach that level of subsidization, then it is incumbent upon every single organization to start thinking about ways in which they can leverage carbon markets in order to reduce these costs. Because these costs will have to be incurred. ESG costs, like we had spoken earlier, funding gap is about $3.7 trillion every year till 2030. That is globally. So there has to be a creative way in which we bring in financing into the sector in order to subsidize these really, really steep costs in some instances. Okay.
The NSE has developed and has made some strides in making sure this market, carbon credit market, comes to fruition. I don't know what you've observed from your ecosystems.
Yes, so I think about a year or two ago, there was an announcement in the papers that the NSE, together with the Nairobi International Finance Center and Air Carbon Exchange, which is an established exchange in Singapore, had struck an agreement to build a carbon markets platform for trading here in Kenya. And the direction that they were taking was through a securitization of carbon credits to be traded here at the NSE. So it will be interesting to hear the progress that they've made so far, and when we should expect to see the launch of this platform. And we look forward to seeing what comes out of that exercise. Excellent. But I am aware that they are actually putting something together.
Excellent. Do you see any potential financial products related to carbon markets that could be on the counter?
Absolutely, absolutely. One key one is derivatives from carbon revenues, specifically forwards. Because one major issue that we've had in the continent is financing carbon credits, or financing carbon credit projects. And if we are able to develop forwards for carbon credits, it means that we'll be able to get that much financing in advance so that carbon credit projects can actually take off. Because one problem that we are seeing is that projects are not taking off because of the fact that we do not have funding to even develop those projects. Because in some cases, transaction costs can be extremely high. So if we can develop forwards, derivatives such as forwards, that will be used to finance carbon credit projects. It can even be segmented into sectors and securitized here at the NSE. That will be extremely beneficial towards ensuring that capital flows get into the sector.
Okay, maybe one final comment on this exchange part of things. From what you're saying is that we have such potential. So then we should have such a robust, if I may use that word, carbon market. What do we need to do?
Yes. I'm extremely grateful to the Kenyan government because they're already setting the right regulatory framework that is required for us to actually make use and take advantage of the carbon markets. The Ministry of Environment recently released the carbon market regulations, which are key not only towards building investor confidence, but also protecting communities on ground, because there are regulations there that also state exactly what needs to be done when you're developing a carbon project as pertains the community. So these regulations are important for making sure that investment flows and also making sure that carbon projects actually take off. It will be also extremely important for us to develop regulations around trading of carbon credits. There are people in the sector who are not for trading of carbon credits because they believe that carbon credits need to be generated for them to be retired. That is the only way that you can show that a mitigation outcome has been effective, at least in their perspective. So could we have regulations that give guidelines on exactly how these carbon credits are traded? So that will be very interesting to see. It is in terms of even taxation. At least that is that the regulation is clear as far as that is concerned, and it will be interesting to see how, say for example, capital gains made from carbon credit transactions here at the NSE will be treated from a tax perspective. So I believe that it will be, we've started well, but we will need to continue building out on the regulations for us to get the right framework for carbon trading here at the NSE.
Okay. You know, being in the ecosystem, I'm sure you have seen your fair share of challenges and risks that you could probably point out. I don't know whether there are some that you could point out. What do you see as challenges and risks in this?
Excellent. So I think we'll keep on coming back to the one biggest challenge, which is financing. Carbon credit project development can sometimes be extremely costly because the transaction costs could be high. So one major challenge is financing, and if you're able to tackle that through all these instruments that we're using, like for example, the FDB coming up with the $2 billion facility to help support this project, this carbon credit project development, either from a TA perspective or from a risk mitigation perspective. That will be extremely important. So financing is a major challenge. Another risk that we see is emission reductions not actually being attained, because what usually happens when you start developing a carbon project, you give estimations on what you expect the carbon project to deliver as far as mitigation outcomes is concerned. But there are situations where those mitigation outcomes are not achieved, and hence we get to a point where we have issues with investors because the amounts that were promised to them are not gotten to. Another issue, another big risk is the integrity issue. I think last year we saw our fair share of articles speaking about the integrity issue in carbon markets. A good example is the Kariba Dam, the Kariba Red Plus project that is stated to have grossly overstated their emission reductions. We have other players in the clean cooking sector who have been touted to have really overstated their emission reductions. So that in itself is a risk, because once you have a sector tainted by integrity issues, then you do not have investor confidence. You don't have money flowing into that sector anymore, and we have that as being one major risk factor. Then the other definitely will be geopolitics. Where you you'd find that certain institutions or certain administrations will come in and they will not consider climate action as being extremely important.
Yeah.
That in itself will actually deter investors from getting into the sector, because if you don't have the backing of government, then there's high likelihood of that sector suffering in some instances.
You're right. As we come to a close, I want you to, I feel like I should ask you to just do a parting shot, but I want to future myself in a carbon market and ask you, how would it look like?
Yeah.
You know, we are so fond of our, equities market and everything else, but now we have a whole carbon market established. Yeah. How would it look like?
So the outlook is extremely positive. You look at McKinsey, for example.
Yeah.
They estimate that Kenya will be able to sequester or will be able to have emission reductions to the tune of about 19 megatons to about 24 megatons every year.
Yeah.
To put that into perspective from a financial term, that will translate to about $380 million to around $480 million every single year for Kenya. That puts it up high there as being one of Kenya's most valuable foreign exchange earners.
Wow.
And also one of Kenya's most valuable exports. So the outlook looks very good for Kenya, but there's a lot of work that will need to be done. There's a lot of work that will need to be done in regulation. There's a lot of work that will need to be done in capacity building. There's a lot of work that will need to be done in terms of stimulating financial flows into the sector for the purpose of developing the projects. There's a lot of work that will need to be done in tightening regulations enough to get us to a point of saying that there is significant integrity in the market in order for us to boost investor confidence even further. So the outlook, at least from a Kenyan perspective, looks very good. Not only from McKinsey's predictions, but also from JP Morgan's. We've had predictions from BCG. We've had predictions from other institutions of high repute that lay a positive outlook for carbon markets, not only for Kenya, but also for Africa as large.
Okay. Evans Kayo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Maina.
Great to have you here, and thank you so much, our viewers. I hope you have something taken out, especially when it comes to matters carbon market. Evans Kayo right there, the Chief Operating Officer at Vast Carbon, helping us understand how this would really change, and we have so much potential. I leave you now with the markets. Thank you so much for your time.